So, some curious news to kick off with. Do you remember that World Economic Forum video, 8 predictions for the world in 2030? The one that said you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Whatever you want, you'll basically rent and it'll be delivered by drone. And the US won't be the world's leading superpower. And we'll eat much less meat. You know that video? Well, that was on their Twitter account for 4 years, and now it's recently been removed. This is likely due to the massive public backlash it received over the past few weeks. Interesting. I guess even they have realised the bad optics of actually putting their nefarious plans out there on public display. I guess sometimes it's best to keep some of these things secret, eh, Klaus? On the subject of the World Economic Forum, the deranged ideas of Klaus Schwab are now beginning to slowly be introduced into the mainstream consciousness. Here in Ireland, there's been a TV show on our national broadcaster, on the second channel, RTE2, and the show is called Future Island. The second episode featured a discussion with Professor Luke O'Neill, who has been the media darling when it comes to all things COVID-19 and who has been championing the COVID-19 vaccine. And guess what they talked about?
So we're in the middle of, apparently, a fourth industrial revolution. I thought there was only one.
The fourth industrial revolution. They actually mentioned it. The fourth industrial revolution is, of course, the brainchild of Professor Klaus Schwab, the man who coined the phrase. He wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution.
I wrote a book and conceptualized the idea. I was probably the first to use this name or this definition, Fourth Industrial Revolution, as being a transforming concept, not only for businesses, but also for the economy, for politics, and for society.
And then followed up on the idea in his book from this year, COVID-19 and the Great Reset. Now, Klaus Schwab was not mentioned during this program, but the show did focus on almost all of the World Economic Forum's primary talking points and agendas. Almost like this entire program was nothing but a propaganda sales pitch for Schwab's ideas. Renewable energy was discussed at length, and comedian PJ Gallagher did a segment on self-driving cars. He was demonstrating a Tesla. He even suggested to Luke O'Neill, who doesn't drive, that this self-driving car was a good reason not to get a driving license. Well, you know, under the UN's Agenda 2030, we won't be permitted to own our own vehicles, and people will have to make use of either public transport or self-driving vehicles. The reason for this is because once they relocate people into the densely populated Stackham High cities, the populace will not be permitted to travel to certain rural areas deemed to be ecological preservation and biodiversity zones. Humans will be living in smart cities, which are basically a euphemism for mass surveillance prison cities, policed by AIs and drones, and where everyone is tracked and monitored. Self-driving cars prevent people from having free movement to areas that the central planners of tomorrow don't want us to travel to. So the self-driving car that you're renting simply won't take you to certain locations around the country. You'll only be allowed to go to locations where humans are permitted to travel to. Free movement is not supposed to come back. Of course, those of us who've researched Agenda 2030 already know all of this, but this wasn't mentioned on the program because, you know, it's best not to reveal the whole game plan to the general public. Just win them over with the good stuff first, right? Anyway, PJ Gallagher did say the following: let's face it, this is the way it's all going to go. It's not going to take a long time. It will be illegal to drive and have fun in your car, and I will miss that too. Incredible. That's just thrown out there like it's perfectly normal. Why would we accept this? Such a suggestion is just pure authoritarianism. Well, it's going to be made illegal, so we better not challenge it because the government knows best for us. What the hell is wrong with people? We will not allow it to be illegal to drive our own car. Of course, we know that the extremely wealthy will be allowed to go wherever they want. It's just us plebs who will have our movements restricted. Why must we stand for this kind of crap? Why isn't this called out and utterly ridiculed and rejected? My concern is that the Irish people are in such a docile and highly suggestible state right at the moment. and they're so utterly compliant due to COVID that they're just programmed to do exactly what they're told. Like they're nothing more than children and the government is mommy and daddy. And then this gentleman, Bobby Healy, starts talking about drone deliveries. And we know from the World Economic Forum video that I mentioned at the start of this video that the plan is for us to own nothing and to rent everything, with items we rent being delivered to our homes by drone. Now, they didn't mention the fact that we're not going to own anything in the future, but they did talk about how we're going to have all this free time. Very utopian, you know? Well, this portion of the discussion completely ties into the plans that the globalists have for us by 2030. It's truly shocking to see what was once the crazed utopian ideas of the World Economic Forum now being sold and normalised to the unwitting Irish public on the state broadcaster. The public, of course, have absolutely no idea about the dangerous Marxist communist motivations of the likes of Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations. They just assume that all these fancy new toys are just natural technological evolutions and progressions that are all a product of breakthroughs in science and consumer technology. They have no idea about the actual political intentions of the elites who are pushing them on our nations as part of their plans to seize control of our societies. Gallagher then continues to talk about his experience in the Tesla self-driving car, saying that he was terrified of getting back into his car because he's back into human interaction and humans make mistakes, whereas all the self-driving cars are talking to each other all the time. I found this utterly pathetic. I'm not surrendering my car, and I'm not placing my trust in machines to run my life. Thanks very much. I reject this Internet of Things lifestyle. But of course, you can expect significant taxes to be levied on fossil fuel-powered cars in order to phase them out. The reality is, those who control the machines will determine our freedom, in the same way that those who run big tech social media companies can determine who gets to speak in the online public square or who gets demonetized, for example. Internet of Things technologies will be abused because more and more power will be placed into the hands of a few billionaires. Later, the show covered the topic of what teaching would look like in the future. This led to virtual reality, and they gave a demo of this. From what we know of Schwab's work and the World Economic Forum, and as Rosa Corey discussed in our chat about Agenda 21 a few months ago, the plan is a kind of Ready Player One society, where humans will be too risk-averse and afraid to be around each other because of the constant terror about viruses, the new abnormal world. People will think they're going to get sick by being around other people, so people will retreat into fantasy worlds, where virtual environments will feel more free and safe than the real world itself. In a dystopian, socially distant world, virtual reality will be the means by which people work, learn, communicate, and even socialize. Basically, it's the Matrix. Why leave your home, when you can just slap on a headset and live like a pod person? In his book, COVID-19, The Great Reset, Schwab literally describes the COVID-19 virus as one of the least deadly pandemics the world has experienced over the last 2,000 years. And he said the consequences of COVID-19 in terms of health and mortality will be mild compared to previous pandemics, yet he still believes that COVID is an excuse to make widespread social, economic and political changes to the world.
It is obvious that we are in the midst of the most severe crisis the world has experienced since World War II. 75 years ago, countries and people came together to shape the post-war global order, which brought us decades of peace, increased global cooperation and prosperity to hundreds of millions of people around the world.
Seriously, just some free advice. If you're looking to take over the world without people realizing it, maybe don't make it too obvious by having a guy who sounds like a cliched James Bond villain as your public face.
The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century.
Well, isn't it so convenient then that this virus came out of nowhere and served as the perfect excuse for you to bring about this great reset? Almost like the virus was just a cover story to crash the economy and force widespread social, economic and political changes that you wanted all along.
It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion and equality. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. We have a choice to remain passive, which would lead to the amplification of many of the trends we see today: polarization, nationalism, racism, and ultimately increased social unrest and conflicts. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract, particularly integrating the next generation. We can change our behavior to be in harmony with nature again. And we can make sure that the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution are best utilized to provide us with better lives. In short, we need a great reset.
He knows only too well that a vaccine is not required. The life changes and restrictions on human movement and freedom have given governments and entities like the World Economic Forum, UN and their partners the opportunity to reshape our lives. The lockdowns are never supposed to end, only to move along a spectrum of restrictive levels 1 to 5, for example. Normality is never supposed to return, because that would mean we'd be free again. The technologies being developed as part of the fourth industrial revolution are not meant to improve the quality of our lives. That's only the deceptive sales and marketing pitch. They're meant to create a technocratic prison for us. Sadly, most of the people shilling this revolution probably don't even realise what's behind it, and maybe those who do simply don't care about the true cost to humanity. Now, if you've seen some of my recent videos, you will know that the slogan for the Great Reset is Build Back Better, which has been used by the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, as well as the likes of Joe Biden and Boris Johnson. Even New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern has recently used the phrase.
There is much work to do. We will build back better from the COVID crisis.
They're all suspiciously singing from the same hymn sheet. Our political class are merely puppets for the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and they're all following the same script when it comes to their approach to dealing with COVID, climate change, and the economy. The global communist New World Order coup is taking shape in order to usher in Klaus Schwab's fourth industrial revolution. And Canada's Justin Trudeau gave the following address back in September, and it's just filled with all the buzzwords that the globalist elite are using right now. Take a listen to this.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change. Building back better means getting support to the most vulnerable while maintaining our momentum on reaching the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. Canada is here to listen and to help.
On that point, just a reminder that the World Economic Forum and the United Nations signed a strategic partnership framework in June of 2019, last year. The UN Forum partnership was signed in a meeting held at United Nations headquarters between UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and World Economic Founder and Executive Chairman Klaus Schwab to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The article continues, the partnership identifies 6 areas of focus: financing the 2030 Agenda, climate change, health, digital cooperation, gender equality and empowerment of women, education and skills, to strengthen and broaden their combined impact by building on existing and new collaborations. It all sounds absolutely wonderful until you look into it further and realize that what they're pushing is control over absolutely everything. It is nothing more than global communism. Let's shift gears now and talk about this from the UK, from ted.europa.eu. The MHRA, which is the Medicines and Health Products Regulatory Agency, and it says, short description, the MHRA urgently seeks an artificial intelligence software tool to process the expected high volume of COVID-19 vaccine adverse drug reactions and ensure that no details from the ADR's reaction text are missed. Explanation. For reasons of extreme urgency under Regulation 32(2)C, related to the release of a COVID-19 vaccine, MHRA have accelerated the sourcing and implementation of a vaccine-specific AI tool strictly necessary, it is not possible to retrofit the MHRA's legacy systems to handle the volume of ADRs that will